I think we're going to be good to kick things off. So thank you very much for joining us today. We are here to chat a little bit about the Atlassian system of work. If you have been to team maybe or not, but you probably have heard about this quite a bit. And the goal today is to help kind of really understand what that is and what that means, at least to us, how we understand that messaging, the potential benefits, and how we kind of typically get started on that journey. Uh, my name is Roman Pisani. I am head of solutions and client engagement for Valiantys. What that means is I've been within the Atlassian ecosystem and the broader kind of IT consulting ecosystem for the better part of a decade. And so I've had the opportunity to see this come into play for organizations that have managed to really kind of transition to that model, as well as some of the gotchas that we potentially want to avoid. So the agenda for today is pretty simple. We are going to go um, kind of introduce the system of work, what it is, what it means, how Atlassian is thinking about it, and how that translates to the different tools of the Atlassian ecosystem that you may know that support the system of work. We want to make sure that it is clear why this is an interesting approach for thinking about the broader organization and kind of the benefits that you're getting there. Um, and we'll spend a fair bit of time talking about kind of the journey, where to get started, and giving you some resources to get on your way there. So that's the plan for today. Hopefully that is in line with what you're expecting as you're joining, and we'll get started right away with the first part of our process, talking a little bit about the system of work. So this is the picture that Atlassian uses to talk about the system of work, comparing kind of the organization to a building, right? Where each department team has their own floor, essentially. And right now, for a lot of organizations that we see, for each of those departments, they have their own tools, processes. They have to find ways to interconnect with each other, but that's often a challenge. And what we see is potential some of the challenges that we see there is disconnected goals, right? So how do you ensure that the team's goals or the department's goal align well with the organization's goal? And how do you ensure that the work that you do on a day-to-day basis actively supports those goals? And that's the main challenge for a lot of organizations, where there's a ton of work that is being done, work that may be providing some value, but that may not actually move the ball forward on those key objectives that we have at the top level of the org. Communication is a standard issue that is brought up, especially when you talk about communication across teams and across departments. That's where it usually breaks down, where you have to interact or interface with different teams and different parts of the organization. Of course, with that comes the potential silos, the tool silos that kind of keep knowledge in specific places that are often hard to kind of open up to the rest of the organization. And what that means is that team members spend a lot of time finding and searching content. It is often a process that is really taxing on the teams to find the right information. And what you start seeing often is team members and teams or departments start building their own repository of information that is not always updated and not always kind of in line with what we would like to see. Another topic that has become more and more um, prevalent, I think, in our conversations with our customers is the use of AI, and how there is a rush, I think, from every organization to understand how they can leverage AI. But the current state of actually deploying and gaining meaningful results from those tools and technologies has been limited. A lot of the companies that have invested in rolling out some level of AI components to their tool stack often report moderate success at best. So this is definitely something that we see quite a bit. And I think in a lot of the cases that we see, this is an approach issue more than a technology issue. So we can come back to this. So all this to say that these are common challenges that the system of work potentially help address, right? And when we talk about the system of work, or when Atlassian talks about the system of work, the idea is that we're not talking about a tool stack, a technology. We're really talking about what they call a philosophy, right? And the idea is how tech-driven organizations, which today is probably most organizations, have a heavy reliance on technology, how those organizations should work and how they connect that technology to the actual people, the teams, the business and technology teams together to make progress and actually have impact, right? So that's the whole philosophy here for the system of work. And Atlassian has had for a long time components of this where they had different modules and solutions to help teams work together. Now, over the last few years, they've invested heavily in connecting all of this together into that system of work vision. And the system of work relies on a few principles that are essential for any organization that wants to be productive in the way they work across those teams and across the organization. One of the key components is aligning work to goals. I was mentioning it earlier. This is one of the key challenges, right? Is how do you make sure that the work you do actually moves the ball forward? That is a big, big piece of this. The second piece is that you have to have the discipline to plan and track work. And that means that you have to have a place to do that. And you have to have visibility around this for you and the different teams around you. The other component of those principles here is what they call unleash collective knowledge. And what that means, at least to me, is really making that knowledge available throughout the organization, getting over the burden of those silos of knowledge within departments and teams, and making sure that if you need access to some data points, to some insights, to some information, you have access to that. And then finally, it's about starting to really leverage AI, and AI as teammates is potentially a good way to put it, where you think about AI components as team members that are able to actually deliver work and help you do your work day to day. And there's a lot of components to that as we go forward. So of course, the outcome of this is if you manage to do this, the goal or the ideal end state is that you're going to be able to deliver faster, right? Provide value faster so that time to value goes down. Hopefully that means you'll have more engaged teams where there's less issues with kind of the constant grind of navigating those complexities within the organization, finding the information, etc. And of course, what you want is ultimately a return on investment on the platform and the processes and the people that make up that system of work. In more concrete terms, right? So the system of work for Atlassian is, of course, at the heart, a set of solutions for different teams and different parts of the organization. And what you can see here on this map is that we have a few main categories for this, where on the top right, we have kind of our baseline work management for everybody, work management for all. And this is just a day-to-day tracking, planning of work, making sure we understand what we should be working on, what objectives that helps move forward, and what's our current status and progress on those work items. This is common to pretty much all teams within organizations. And there is really no reason for a team to not having the discipline to have some sort of formal planning process and some sort of formal tracking process around work. The reality, though, is today the way teams do this is across multiple tools. Sometimes they have specialized tools that include that piece, depending on who they are in the organization and what sort of job they do. Sometimes it is multiple tools in the organizations for different departments that do similar things. So there's a lot of different places where that work can be tracked and work can exist, it's rarely connected. And when it is, it's often with limited visibility. And then on the left side, you can see the developer experience part of the system of work. And this is, of course, historically where Atlassian has been very strong, where we can support the whole development lifecycle and ensure that the people that work in that part of the organization have top tier experience with their systems and really can get productive as much as they can by automating, by providing the information you need when you need it. That's a key piece of it. On the opposite side, on the bottom right corner, we have service management, and that can be anything from IT service management to enterprise service management, where you may have teams like legal teams, marketing teams that are opening up internal portals to capture work essentially as an intake mechanism for them to then organize and prioritize that work. And finally, on the bottom left, we have strategy and planning. And this is, again, very much kind of the top layer of the organization, how you plan that work, but at the top level, where we want to take the organization and how we connect that to the actual execution of that. And you can see that for each quadrant here, we have a lot of different tools that are common in the ecosystem. I think the last time I saw a stat, it was like, hundreds of SaaS tools is the average for most organizations, where you have a lot of different tools. Some of them are specialized tools, some of them are more general. But the key here is that there's a balance between providing those different tools and integrating in them with a core kind of source of truth. And that's probably where we're going to go next. So this is a good picture to understand where the Atlassian ecosystem and the Atlassian system of work plays, and which parts of the organization you can potentially have an impact going through that path. So what are the components of that system of work? This is the new picture that, again, if you've been at Team, you probably have seen this, or if you watched online, this should not be new to you. If not, that's probably quite new. But this is the way Atlassian now kind of presents the overall footprint, or the overall Atlassian stack, if we want to call it that. And you'll notice that we have a number of different tools, essentially, that make up the Atlassian solutions here, and some core components of the Atlassian platform. And I'll come back to this. But if you've been within the Atlassian ecosystem for a while, you'll know about Confluence, Jira. These have been around forever. Confluence being where you manage your knowledge, Jira being where you manage your work. Now, what is kind of new is this notion of layer for team collaboration across the organization. And for Atlassian, this will be Confluence, Jira. Loom now is part of that picture. Loom allows you to save time by avoiding meeting, working more async. And this is becoming really a solid base for collaboration across most teams within the organization. And then we have more specialized collections or more specialized sets of tools, right? So you can see here in green, we have our development tooling, Compass and Bitbucket. We have our service management tooling for customer service management, asset management, Jira service management. That is the broader piece of the ecosystem. And then to the right, we have our strategy collection, right? So Jira Align, Talent, that is a new tool that was recently announced by Atlassian, and Focus. So this is where you do that top level planning. And then of course, here we have Jira Product Discovery, which serves as an ideation product, an intake product for product teams to manage that flow of ideas into actual work. Now, all of this is supported by the Atlassian platform. There's a number of experiences that are now part of the platform, including Atlassian Analytics and Atlassian Intelligence, aka Rovo. Atlassian made this announcement at Team that Rovo will now be included in all enterprise and premium subscription very shortly, and then they will extend that beyond. So this is becoming a really key piece of that ecosystem throughout those different components. And then below this, we have the teamwork graph. And this is where I think there is a major advantage in the system of work in that conversation, because you have work that is being done by different teams across this portfolio of tools. And what the teamwork graph is a way to connect all of that together, allowing you to get information about, the different pieces of the equation that you need to understand where we, on this specific initiative, for example. This allows you to, or this allows the Atlassian platform to understand the relationship between you as a user, the projects you work on, the people you work with. This is really capturing a lot of information in the background to help make reporting, make search extremely powerful. So if we go back to that base layer of kind of that foundation work, this is now what Atlassian calls the teamwork collection. And what we have in there is Jira, Confluence, Loom, and all the Rovo capabilities that are part of this, including the ability to create AI agents, essentially, to help you in your day-to-day work. This is critical because this is, again, the foundation layer that is or should be shared across most teams in the organization, because this is where you align that work to objectives, where you make sure that you plan and track the work, where you provide the knowledge that is to be shared within the organization, and of course, where you can leverage AI. There's a lot of different things Atlassian provides around kind of the rationale behind organizing the tool set in that collection here. But the key is this is an integrated set of solutions that help those teams do the work that they need, while providing as well the ability to report on at a higher level in the organization. We touched on it a little bit, or a few times actually, but this idea of setting goals and tying the work to goals, I think, is really essential to a lot of the productivity that we see in organizations that are doing this right? This ability to say, I know that the work I'm doing ties into something bigger, and from the top level of the organization, I can be assured that the work that we're doing, the work that we're executing on, is actually, again, moving the ball forward. There is a lot on this. I'm not going to go deep into individual demos for the organization for each of those pieces, but I just want to give you a sense of what that means. In this new platform, we have kind of the ability to navigate to our home, essentially, and have access to our goals and the updates around the different goals that we're tracking, where we are off track, at risk, on track. And then you can drill down to specific goals and understand how that work is going through the recent updates from the team, potentially how it ties into work in Jira, right? And that's really key, because this is how you want to do that linkage to Jira at work, but also to teams, right? The people that are supporting that work, and where is that work actually happening in the organization. And so all of this becomes connected, as well as the risk associated to that project and more. And when you work from Jira, potentially, you have also that visibility on those goals, right? So you can see that this work item you're working on actually ties into a greater goal in the organization. So this is just an example of kind of what that looks like in practice, but the idea is that you have a place to set the goals, a place to make sure that you can tie those goals to work being done by people. And this is kind of this full chain that gives you the data and accountability that you need. Of course, we have the work tracking part of the organization, right? How do you actually plan what you're going to do? How do you track success and achievement against that? This has been, I would say, historically, where there's been a long-standing expertise from Atlassian and from the platform and the solutions that are providing this. What is more recent in the last few years is really working hard at making this as simple as possible for different teams, including business teams, and making sure that they find ways to track work in an interface that is as simple as possible for them, with ways of working similar to spreadsheets, where it's needed, calendar, timeline views, that you provide kind of the context and the views on the data, on the tasks that you're tracking in a way that is as simple as possible. And so this is now kind of the baseline for a lot of organizations that are bringing in technology teams, but beyond in Jira for tracking the day-to-day work, and not just tracking, planning as well. And of course, the knowledge. So this is a big piece um, uh, that we were kind of mentioning in those challenges earlier, right? Is how do you make sure that you're not siloing the knowledge in the organization, and you're making sure that anybody that needs to have access to knowledge has access, but also can find it pretty quickly and easily. So this is a common challenge. There's been a ton of work done in this area. And frankly, I'm quite excited about some of the new AI capabilities that are really making this experience far, uh, far more efficient, right? So most of you know and like Confluence, I'm sure. This is really the repository of content throughout your organization that you can organize for each department, teams, etc. It now, of course, includes the Rovo functionality where you can actually ask a question, take action on that content. So this is really powerful. And not only you can do this in a kind of simple chat format, but you can build purpose-built agents that will help you identify or take specific actions on that content. So this is across the platforms, not just Confluence, but this is extremely powerful. And the new, I think, real game changer is the ability to leverage Rovo Search. So what this is the ability to connect not only to the Atlassian platform, but there is more than 50 connectors for different tools, such as Slack and Figma and other tools within your organization. And you can use semantic search across those different tools. So, if we go for something like mobile app launch, for example, the system will go and look at all the tools that are connecting or connected to Rovo Search, respect my permission. So I will only be able to see the content that I have access to in those different tools, and provide results that could be either Confluence, Jira, or any of the other tools that are connected. And this is really powerful, especially that it now includes as well smart links in those references. So it allows you to navigate some of the potential challenges of finding the relevant information. And I mentioned the graph earlier. So in the background, this is powered by the teamwork graph. So the results that I'm seeing are relevant to me because they're connected to the projects I work on. There was more than one mobile app launch. This will understand that I'm working on a specific one and provide results related to this. The people that I'm connected with, the people I interact with, etc. This is really what it uses in the back end to be able to provide relevant content to me. So this really addresses one of those key challenges we talked about this ability to find content when we need it. It's become my default day-to-day now. Instead of using the in product search or anywhere, I leverage the search day-to-day. There's a lot more to talk about in knowledge and Confluence and the ability to manage that knowledge there. One of the newer elements in that or components in that family of the Atlassian ecosystem is Loom, of course. And what we see is it's quickly becoming one of the fastest growing and most interesting tools for organizations that are still struggling with the post-COVID distribution of work and teams across the world. This really helps by essentially removing the need from meetings by simply having you record instantly from any of the tools, but also just your laptop and go through kind of what you need to share, get people to react to it, provide answers, and potentially even record actual meetings to keep track of those. So there's a lot that goes into this, and it helps capture that knowledge in a way that is a lot more seamless that you may have experienced before, because you can add that dimension of just speaking to the people you want to tell something to, and then leverage AI capabilities essentially to make that content in different formats, whether it is text or other things. Well, I've talked about AI quite a bit already, but really what I see as the potential interesting piece here is that we have all this content, all those teams working together in the same platform. And this is kind of what you need to have really relevant AI results, right? Is data. And so by connecting that data, having that data shared, making sure that that data is put in context through the teamwork graph, the usage of AI is actually um, useful on day one, right? Because you get very quickly to leverage it as you write up a documentation article. It understands the context, what you're writing about. It can help provide details. It can help summarize in your context. It can help search. And then you can have more advanced use cases with robo agents to actively, automatically, create your release notes without really having to think about it, that sort of thing. So there is a ton of small parts of your day to day that become really interesting by having that AI capability embedded in the platform rather than going to kind of a third party that is disconnected to get that capability. Now, if you want to go beyond, so this was the teamwork foundation layer, right? If you want to go beyond that and kind of elevate throughout the organization, this is where the strategy collection comes in, right? And for those who've been around for a while, Jira Align is kind of the solution that has been around in the ecosystem for a long time. And it is a really great tool for organizations that are looking um, to plan and manage that work at scale, and that have made a decision about how they structure their work around agility and the ability to work that way. There's two new components now, focus and talent. So focus is also a tool that will help you understand how you tie that strategy to the execution of the work, understand how different parts of the organization work together for helping that big picture come together, right? And really do some of that planning and reporting in there. And then talent is really about managing resources at the top level of the organization. So this is just an example of more use case specific tooling, right? Beyond that team level work, but that plugs straight into that data. And so you leverage the data that your teams are producing by doing their work, right? And you're able to extend that to levels of reporting at the executive layer of the organization that provide actual insights and that help you make decisions. The business challenges that this typically addresses, right, is what I was talking about, that getting that visibility of the work and where we are today on what we're planning to deliver, how and when we're expecting this to be delivered, sorry. And this is key because this is what ultimately enables you to make the right decisions. And this is only really possible if you have those teams that operate in an ecosystem where they plan and track that work aligned to those goals that we have, and make sure that they can do this in a way that you can easily pull that data in, right, and have visibility over this. So coming back to that picture, there's more, of course, a lot more to discuss around the different areas of specialization. Whether we talk about the developer experience, Compass is really a game changer in understanding your infrastructure, if I want to say it that way, but that's probably not the right term. But essentially mapping teams to code into services and applications that they maintain, and making that information really easily accessible throughout the organization while providing metrics and all sorts of data points that are useful to managing those different teams. The service management piece is also very specific, and we have a lot of more content around this as you need. So there's different parts that we're not going to explore in depth today. What I wanted to come back on briefly is those core platform experience or platform apps, right? One of the key ones we touched on was Rovo and AI. That is kind of a shared experience across the different tools within this platform. But we also have analytics. So analytics is able to take information from that graph and from the different parts of the organization where they do work to provide more advanced dashboards and to provide visibility on the work at different levels of the organization. And this is quickly becoming a very useful piece of the day-to-day work of teams, right? Because it can act both as a core BI tool to provide higher level executive dashboards. But the interesting part of this is, unlike a dedicated tool like a Tableau or something like this, the self-service capability is really good. So if you need to go in and build your own dashboard, your own reports based on the information you have access to, you can leverage actual AI capabilities as well to help kind of draft queries and build those reports very quickly, or even leverage some of the templated dashboards that are provided to explore your own data, right? And focus on the work that your team is doing, for example, without having to go out and request help from a different part of the organization to build dashboards, right? So this enables much more of that kind of I'm curious about this trend. Let's go explore it, and gives you the tool to do that rather than having to go ask for a dashboard to be built and wait, weeks for that to happen, depending on your organization. So this is, again, one of those cross-platform or cross-product experience where you can bring in data from different products. You can even bring in data from outside of the Atlassian ecosystem, right? And feed that into those dashboards so you can compare maybe the work that you're doing to the financial impact it has in the organization and that sort of thing. So this is becoming a huge piece of that puzzle when we talk about visibility throughout the organization. We often refer to capabilities within analytics. Now, I've talked about this quite a bit already, but the teamwork graph is a thing where if you think about kind of leveraging AI and where the future is going with this and how we make sense of it, because it's not really clear for most organizations yet. The key, if you've played with it at all, the key for getting results out of whatever task you're putting into AI is good context and good information, right? There is a critical need to feed into the systems, especially if you talk about Gen AI, the relevant data, the relevant information. So first, you avoid issues with hallucination. This is becoming more under control these days. But two, providing real value to the users, right? And in the background of those different tools that we've talked about that make up the overall Atlassian platform, each of those objects that we have, whether we talk about a task in Jira, whether we talk about goals, whether we talk about specific knowledge articles in Confluence, for example, those are registering as objects, and those objects have links and dependencies depending on the users who created them, the users who reviewed them, that sort of thing. So there's a lot of metadata essentially in that graph that allows you to connect information in a way that would be very hard to do manually, but is readily available to the AI capabilities in the platform. And so this is really what allows you to jump into Rovo and ask, what should I focus on today? And there is an understanding of who you are, what you're working on, who are the people that are dependent on you, what they need from you, that sort of thing. So this is very powerful. And I think this is the right way to think about data and how you feed data into AI, is having this sort of relationship across the different elements in your organization really identified, so that context exists and you can leverage that information as you move forward. All right, what are the benefits of all of this? Well, it's not just the tools conversation, right? The tools that we discussed here, they support the idea of the system of work, but as we discussed, is really those principles, the way teams work together and interact together, that really make that come together. And on the tool side, there's a kind of classic picture that most organizations understand, is that historically, at least, you would tend to have specialized tools for different teams. And even if they're not that specialized, you sometimes have 2 or 3 different tools for the same use case, like, standard work planning. And what you end up having to do is either manually through exporting and reporting on data, or in an automated manner, integrate information across those different systems. Every time you do that, though, you do have to select what information you push from one system to another. You do have to make rules on how that information flows from one system to the other. And what you end up having is very often um, a system or a system that is full of friction, where you may be able to share some information, but it's not the complete picture, and you may be limited in how you share your own information and access that. So my my understanding of the system of work, and where I've seen it work very well for organizations where we are implementing similar approaches, right, is this idea of there is one thing that most of our teams have in common throughout the organization, and that is we need to plan and track work. We need to align that to goals, and then we need to share knowledge across, right? And so for these core use cases, we can leverage that system of work and then plug into specialized tools where it's needed, where you need to take actions that are specific to those teams. And what you end up having is a layer of the organization where that information is free flowing across teams, and that you can plug into those specialized tools. You can integrate with those specialized tools where needed. And that reduces that friction of a day to day, kind of having to navigate the dependencies between those teams, because they have the same platform. They all work every day in that platform. And that's the common language, common layer for everybody within the organization. So this is kind of the approach from a tool standpoint. Now, there's a lot that comes with this in terms of how you should approach this and how you can think about um, bringing that through the organization. But when it works well, we talked about this a little before, some of the common gains that we see is faster time to value. There was a report that Tech Target provided Atlassian with some of those stats there, where 40% faster time to value is one of the first elements put forward. Improve project success as well, and that is in part due to the better visibility on the status, the challenges, the risks that are facing those projects, and a lot less interruptions, typically due to context switching, right? When you have to change context between different tools, platforms every day, when you have to go and find someone in person to be able to get the answer that you need to move forward. So this is typically the picture that you gain from putting this together. We have a number of customers that are on this journey. I picked Tyler Technology because we really like the work we're doing with them right now. And we had a shared presentation at Team, actually. And they went on that journey, right? The goal for them was to build a one Tyler vision and organization. And what that meant is making sure that the organization operates on that system of work, right? On the shared system of work throughout the organization. And in the first phases of this, they've been able to very quickly move away from tooling like ServiceNow, Valiantys, even their Jira data center, into that Atlassian cloud ecosystem, realizing some cost savings right away with that tools consolidation, but also aligning teams on similar ways of working and on shared knowledge, which is really key. And as you do this and kind of move your teams that are more traditionally using those tools, you can also get into new teams that may or may not have tooling in place, like HR, finance, and operations that track that day-to-day work, but may not have a formal place to do that. So this is the picture here is very quickly you can get to cost savings and tools consolidation, and then as you refine this is productivity gain by having everyone on that same platform. And now this is the meat of it for me, because as I mentioned before, right, it would be fantastic if I could tell you, hey, just go get this tool and it's gonna help you realize those gains. That is in a lot of cases not the approach, right? It's the it's the journey, it's the transformation that you go through to be able to leverage these capabilities throughout the organization that really make a difference. And what I wanted to do with you today is share a little bit of an example of what that roadmap or journey looks like for most of our customers that are quite successful. It doesn't really necessarily have to end anywhere, right? It can keep growing and keep moving forward. There's a lot of innovation happening within the ecosystem and outside, so there's always change. But typically, when you start understanding that, hey, that one Tyler vision, for example, that one company vision is something that we want to go towards, there's a few different phases that we go through. The first one, of course, is taking stock of the current state, understanding where we are, what are we doing today, what are the pain points, and kind of what are the teams that we have, how they interact with each other, where are the limitations and friction points there. Once you have this understanding of the current state, you want to identify kind of what's our strategy to address those challenges. And in a context like this, that means defining what is that target operating model. So what is that picture of the system of work that we want to have? What is the core platform that we want to leverage? Where do we need to integrate with specialized tooling? How do we want teams to track and report work? How we want teams to come up with objectives? How do we want them to align to the organization objectives? There's a lot of work to be done there. But that is typically the first phase that we call define, right? Is really take stock of the current state and make a plan. At this stage, it has to be a high level plan because it's going to keep evolving as you move forward. But you need to impart a sense of direction in terms of what you're trying to achieve and where you want to go. What value are we trying to get out of all of this? Once you've done this, very often the first step is that consolidation piece. Is how do we get the teams on that platform so we can start day one unleashing some of the benefits of that platform, right? That ability to share knowledge across, that ability to leverage AI capabilities across the organization. So that happens by stepping into that platform, getting the teams using this as the main place for tracking and planning work. If you have like specialist tooling where some of this is being done today, this is the opportunity to migrate that into the organization's platform of choice or system of work, right? For the tools that you can't migrate or you don't want to migrate because they're specialized and they have a purpose, then comes times to integrate that and make sure that we can get the flow of data between those tools and the platform that we need to have. And by then, what you start getting is a proper visibility across the organization because you have consolidation on the platform, you have integrations into the platform, you now are able to take into account what is going on throughout. And this is kind of the first step of that consolidation piece. As we move forward, then this is where we start aligning the organization, and this is where most of the gains in terms of productivity can be realized, where you start aligning ways of working, where you start making some standards in the organization on how we want to communicate that information. The good thing is that you don't need to be, this is not to say that every team has to work the same way, right? You just need to identify what level of work tracking needs to be aligned to the organization and what is up to the teams to set up. And this provides that flexibility here. Once you have a good sense of how we want to work, you can move on to automating processes. Of course, some of these happen, earlier, but when you have clear processes, when you have clear challenges, this is where you can start leveraging AI in part to automate a lot of it and continue to expand beyond the teams that were maybe already in that part, adding more teams to that platform and the ecosystem to expand on the type of processes, use cases that you can cover. And at this stage, we're talking about insights now because you not only have visibility on what's going on, but you have alignment within the organization. So you are able to be more predictable as an organization. You understand better where we're going and what to expect in the future. So this is starting to provide insights and not just raw data in terms of how you're performing against the targets that you have. And then, of course, you continue on that journey for a while. Um, at some point comes times to make sure that you can optimize how you operate the system, and how you're going to continue to improve on it or innovate on that platform, for a long run. So if I summarize quickly kind of the define phase, the objectives of that phase are um, making a plan, and that starts by understanding where we are today. The outcome is that you should be able to communicate a clear vision to the organization at that stage of why we're doing this. So what is the value that we have to gain by doing this? And that will help with change management. And what is that ideal end state? What are we aiming for? Knowing that it might be a North Star, right? It might not be something that happens right away. The second phase, consolidate here, the objectives is essentially to break down the silos. It's removing the barriers between teams that are often tools barriers here, by consolidating tools where there's overlap in the platform and by integrating where needed. The outcome here often actually translate to dollar outcomes, because as you consolidate tools, you typically have cost savings that are pretty quick to be realized once you retire the tools that were within the organization that sometimes are duplicated, that sometimes are just very expensive. So very often, one of the immediate outcome of that consolidation phase is actually cost savings. Another outcome that I mentioned was that ability to finally get a clear visibility over what's going on. And then the align phase, the objective there is to start really executing, right? So at this stage, you're starting to get the teams to work in a consistent manner. You automate, and you really kind of gain, essentially here, the outcome is productivity gain, right? This is where you kind of maximize the value of each parts of the organization, because they are able to work together and you're able to automate. So that's kind of the core here. We can deep dive a little bit more in that define phase if you wanted to get a sense of how we typically approach this, right? If we talk about that first state, first step of understanding the current state, typically what this will take is some form of a technology inventory and assessment, where you try to understand where does the information live today, in what tools, platform, is it siloed, is it accessible, and does it overlap with other tools within the organization? And that should give you a good picture, especially if you put it um, in perspective to the core use cases that you have for those different groups in the organization, and make sure you understand where you have similar use cases throughout the organization. And then what you want to do as well is take stock of where you are in terms of performance. So whatever metrics and KPIs you currently have, we want to go through this and understand if there are some of those gaps that are due to friction, and if we can identify where to focus this, right? Then you move on to building that strategy. So that's the vision, the roadmap, where you clarify kind of what value we're expecting from this transformation, from the system of work, potentially. You identify the risks and potential issues and how we're going to mitigate for that. And then you define kind of what are the expected benefits and gains that we are going to have here. And then you define a timeline around this. Again, this is high level at this time, but it should be focused on kind of getting those short-term wins right out of the gate. Talked about tool consolidation. It could be getting starting with AI and really actually having some value there. Whatever it is that is core into those challenges that we have. Oops, sorry about that. That we have in that first that we have identified in that first step. We now want to have a way to solve for that in a short term, while keeping in mind those long-term goals. And then we're going to go through the target operating model. So this is just clarifying what is that future state blueprint. We want to make sure there's a clear picture out there, high level enough that it's flexible, but clear enough that it gets the teams rallied behind an understanding of where we're going and how we're going to support that. So high level design and governance for this, key roles, responsibilities, etc. So this is what we typically look at in that first phase. An example of what a technology inventory assessment, this is something that Rivian did was Atlassian. What you figure out quickly if you start looking through your organization at the usage and the core use cases for different tools, like here in this context, we have Jira in the center, Airtable, Asana, MS Project, but it could be Monday.com, whatever. You're very likely to identify a simple fact that Jira is already a very important piece of the ecosystem, right? Where you have a lot of users, and those users may overlap with different tools, or there might be some tools that are there for different use cases that have limited overlap. But in a lot of cases, there is overlap. And what that means is that you have users that are context switching between tools on a day-to-day basis to be able to do their work. And those tools may duplicate use cases that can be covered within this Atlassian system of work. So one of the first steps is to take stock of this, understand where are the use cases that justify having an integrated tool that because it's a specialized use case or because there's a different way of approaching it that makes sense for us, and where it makes sense to potentially consolidate. And so if you manage to do this well, you have your initial steps, right, for that tools consolidation that are pretty clear and easy to identify. And as you go into that first phase of the journey, you're going to be able to start capitalizing on that information and making decisions that are going to help realize some costs savings right away. The interesting piece about this transformation roadmap here is that if I'm sure you've seen similar processes in the past, but the challenge is that very often when you saw a roadmap like this, this was like at least a 5 years horizon, right? Like 5 years before you really get to reap the benefits of this process. This is not the case here. What we found very interesting is how quickly you can get to realize some benefits from consolidating on the platform, for example, whether, again, it's AI and capabilities like this, but the simple cost savings that you can achieve by migrating tools into that shared platform is something that within 6 months, a lot of organizations are able to start realizing benefits, retiring tools, getting better collaboration across teams that way. So that's, I think, one of the key takeaways as well. I wanted to give you some resources. These are Atlassian resources that I found relevant to this. They have a whole team playbook site where you have essentially plays for different processes. And I like the change management kickoff play because it forces you to think about what are we doing, how are we thinking about doing it, how we're going to communicate it with the teams. And that's very much something that has to be done in the early phases of that journey. Similarly, defining roles and responsibility, that's another one that I think is critical in that first phase of defining kind of where we want to go. And the last one is a node one. This is more if you're currently still kind of an on-premise Atlassian customer and thinking about moving to the cloud. But what I like about this one is it's a nice visual on how that transformation can work, current state, and how we go through this. So it's a bit old, but there's a few things that are a little outdated there, but I still think it's relevant for a lot of organizations. And I see those links are being shared in the chat. I think we are sharing as well our YouTube channel. You'll find in there a lot of more in-depth demos of each of the different components of the system of work that we've talked about. So please have a look at this. And then if you need additional training as well on any of those aspects of the system of work, we have the ability to help with them as well. So check out those links in the chat there. So if you want to get started on this journey, I think these resources are really helpful to kind of start making a plan. We are, of course, here to help, right? This is the core of what Valiantys does. The idea is that we bring in to the table essentially global expertise. So we have a pool of knowledge and talent across the globe with people that have been into this ecosystem, into transformation consulting for decades and that really have the know-how of how to make this happen, whether it is technical expertise or it is change management and helping, go through that transformation. But we also have uh, different insights, playbooks, frameworks, processes, methodologies that help fast track a lot of that work. So feel free to reach out to me or to Valiantys in general using those different links to have a conversation about kind of how we can help accelerate a little bit that transformation if that's where you want to go and if that's a journey you're on. So this is really kind of the bulk of the conversation here. I know we have just just a few minutes left, but we can look at a few questions if we have any, and I'm happy to take that and answer. If you're live, feel free to use the question panel in the webinar tool. I'll wait for a second. We'll gather some questions. I see one question here asking about the difference between Rovo and Atlassian Intelligence. And this is a good question because Atlassian Intelligence, for those who are familiar with this, was kind of the embedded Gen AI capabilities in the Atlassian platform that was just included in the cost of your licenses there. Rovo was a separate capability that you had to purchase separately that gave you access to actual chat, so the ability to chat with kind of an AI agent, the ability to build custom AI agents, and the ability to search through your content. This used to be, until a week ago, a separate tool. It is now included in that platform experience for premium and enterprise customers. So the difference is becoming less and less important between what Rovo is and what Atlassian Intelligence is, because those two are kind of essentially becoming integrated parts of your experience with the Atlassian platform. But yeah, I hope that helps. I can share some links as well about the differences between those, but it's becoming less and less relevant. And that's about time for us. So I'm happy to stop here. Thank you everybody for joining us today. This of course has been recorded and we'll be posting that soon, so you'll have a link. And please feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions. Thank you very much.